black coding a main character who is a bird. How, Sway? On this episode of the StoryPod podcast. Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Hello, friend. Listen, apologies for missing last week, for missing our hangout last week. Please forgive me. Life was lifing. I had some things that I needed to figure out. I had been sick that week. Life changes that are starting to balance out. So we're back. And as of watching this, if you're watching this on the day that I release it, it is my birthday. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the well wishes. But in any case, my name is Ashley. I am your creative BFF. This is the StoryPod podcast, through which we practice our storytelling muscles. Okay. So that when we are sitting down, excuse me, I had a little fresh juice, a little fresh squeezed beaten apple juice. And it's like that beat is just still hitting my throat. As I was saying, here on this podcast, we flex our storytelling muscles in various ways, okay? So that we have the practice necessary. We have built the muscle memory necessary. We've built the guns necessary to get in front of our own story and be able to perform, all right? Hopefully, that's the goal. Just, getting some practice in. Today, we are returning to an old favorite, or one of my old favorites, which is answering a question from Reddit. I was about to say a credit, answering a question from Reddit. And if you have any questions that I can answer here on the podcast, or if you would like story coaching, you can find all the links below for how to reach out to me. If you just have a question that you would like me to answer here, then just shoot me a cute little message on Instagram, because I feel like that's the quickest and easiest way to reach me. But anyway, let's proceed, shall we? I hope you have all been well. Let's get down to business, all right? Let's read this question. It is from the r/character development subreddit. The poster is Ben-Den-Den-Den-Na, something like that. Black representation in my story. Hello, I'm writing a story featuring entirely birds, and I wanted to maybe make my main character black coded. I had the thought that she would be mixed. Her dad is black and her mom is white. She went to a private school and her mom has big expectations for her daughter that she often can't meet. I'm fiddling with the idea that later her parents get a divorce because the mom is verbally abusive to both her and her dad. Is that reasonable, or should I do something else? Okay. So this question is interesting as a member of the Black Caucus. Am I allowed to say that? I have some thoughts, but before I give my thoughts, I would like to know your thoughts as well. How would you approach this based on what the poster has given here as far as information for the story? How would you answer that? And you don't have to be black to answer this. I welcome all comers. We are welcoming here to all ethnicities, nationalities, thought processes, whatever the case may be. So your answer does not have to be mine, but let's be respectful in the comments. We don't have to agree, or perhaps we shall, but if we don't, we can be respectful, right? So off the top of the dome, what this poster has presented here, and forgive me, I'm probably going to be referring to the original post as I look through, because I'm a visual person and it helps me to continually read words as I form my thoughts, okay? But I find that what he or she, whatever the poster has presented here, does not necessarily give enough information. And I feel like this is kind of tricky, especially since the main characters are birds, and it's even more tricky if it's going to be entirely written, if it's a novel. Now, the fact that they're birds lends itself to perhaps the expectation that the final form of this is going to be visual in some way. So like a comic or perhaps an animated film of some sort. But if it's just a novel, you are, I feel like, and I could be wrong, I could be very uninspired in this area. But I feel like you're really cutting down the ways that you can perhaps add a little black coating, a little black spice or whatever to the character, without going a stereotypical route. So if we're doing only writing, how can you make this character black coded without going into, for example, American culture and the way American culture as a whole perceives Black people or Black culture? I feel like it would be very easy to start to fall into stereotypes and pigeonholing and things that perhaps may not be, for some audiences, may not really be kosher, and for others may be just fine, just fine. It depends on who your audience is, right? But if you don't have visual and audio cues, so things like in this, forgive me, I don't know if this is going to sound, whatever, but when you're doing birds and you don't necessarily have the visual aesthetic of this is an African American character, right? Or a mixed character, and ways that obviously that you would show that would be hair texture, skin color, facial features, perhaps body composition, things like that, right? But since these are birds, you don't want to just do like the dad is a raven and the mom is like a dove. You don't really want to do that. You might. I probably wouldn't go that way. So, I mean, immediately, the first thing you do, if this is a visual medium, is show that these are two different, I'm sorry in advance that these are two different like species of bird. So like a parrot and I don't know the species of birds, a parrot and a macaw, perhaps a bluebird. I don't know. So that would be an immediate thing, but would that take it too fantastical? Because I don't know this answer. Can different species of birds breed with one another and have babies? Is that possible? Or is it like parrots to parrots only? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you can crossbreed. My uninformedness in this area of avian biology, okay, is showing, but but you might have to have a little fantastical fantastical aspect to the story to show this little mixed bird, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, if you don't have things like vocal inflection and style and things like that, it would be, I think, difficult, right? Especially depending on the culture, the type of culture that this is going to be depicted in. African American culture is different than African culture, can be different than British, UK, Black people can be different than a Black person raised in Sweden, whatever, where the diaspora across the world, different cultural norms and ways that people act and ways that they present themselves. So it might not be Black American culture, right? And I also feel like, me personally, I would like to see more representations of Black people just being like normal. So what you've presented here in terms of the kid goes to a private school, like as far as what's being presented here, kid going to a private school, parents having issues, mom has big expectations and is potentially not so great in the home. Those are things that can transcend the experience of any ethnicity, right? That could be maybe that could be Asian coded, that could be European coded, it could be anybody. So I don't understand for this particular story. And I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm like, what is the necessity of making this character Black coded? I'm not saying not to add that representation, but I'm just like, what you've presented doesn't necessarily require that. And it doesn't have to be required. Listen, I'm digging myself in deep. You don't have to be required to make your main character Black, but what you're presenting is something that's not inherently like the Black American experience. It can be anybody's experience. So if this is just something written, I'm drawing some blanks on how you're going to handle this gracefully. Because you can't use description, physical description, because birds do not equate to people in how they look. So if you say that a bird is Black, or in terms of like actually being the color Black, or if a bird is whatever, it's like a light brown bird, whatever bird is light brown. I know I'm sure there are doves or whatever. There's other birds that are light brown, a sparrow, a starling. I don't know. I'm just naming random birds. The color of the bird will not necessarily translate to if you were describing a human, right? Birds don't have hair, so you can't describe the texture of hair to help you tell your audience that this is a Black coded character, right? It's kind of like the experiences that you've set up, and I'm not mad at it. I'm glad that it's like not necessarily like, she was raised in the hood and surrounded by gang members and, whatever the stereotypes of Black American culture are. I'm glad that she's not necessarily, that's not her backstory, to kind of like make it not so stereotypical, potentially like, this not a cool representation of Black people in general. But are you going to do it in how she speaks? That wouldn't necessarily follow because she goes to a private school. So you're not necessarily going to get slang coming out of her that would be something that you would get in a more like, what would be the correct term? Urban, hood, whatever, neighborhood. She's going to be using the language and the colloquialisms of her private school. I'm not a kid, okay? So I don't know how the kids are speaking. My impression is that a lot of the slang kind of crosses racial and socioeconomic barriers. So even using current slang may not give away that this bird is Black coded or mixed. So what you probably have to do is set up the bird society to, after all this time of speaking, trying to work through this question, you'll probably have to set up the world of your bird society to be parallel to whatever culture you're setting it in. So if it's if it's like American culture, then you would, I guess, try to set up similar parallels to America, and vice versa for any other place. However, again, I feel like we could potentially fall into the same sort of stereotype trap where now we're, making her dress a certain way. We're, giving her features that birds don't necessarily have to try to make it seem Black coded. Did I already say you're making her speak a certain way? You're making her have use certain colloquialisms and terminology. So honestly, I'm kind of drawing a blank on what you could possibly do. Now, if this is all writing, if you're doing visual stuff, then you can bring in more tells and you'll have to decide how your bird biology and culture works to show that this is a quote unquote mixed family. Then you could use certain voice actors if it's animation that, this might sound janky, but sometimes you can tell the ethnicity of a person by how they speak, by how their voice sounds, regardless of the words that they're saying, their pronunciation and things like that. So that could be a tell. I don't know if you want to bring in things like species inequities and things like that, prejudice that she may experience due to being the child of these two kind of births. Now, that is kind of like maybe like an older way of thinking about Black culture, Black people, mixed families and mixed people, the struggles that they may have. And at this point, I don't know if it's going to help your story to purposely try to make this character Black coded. Specifically, just let her live her life, just let her live her life. There may be certain experiences that she can have here and there. And it's like, I'm hesitant to suggest bringing in prejudice and things like that, because that might take your story in a direction that you're not really trying to go. Because right now it sounds like you're more so doing like a coming of age story for this main character and the issues that she has in her family and perhaps the issues that she experiences at school. And it's going to also depend on what sort of era of society do you want to set this in. Now, if you're setting it in what would be considered the human American 1950s, then okay, you'll have some things that you can draw on that will make it easier to telegraph to the audience that this is a Black coded character. But if you're setting it in modern times, like 2026 or whatever, I think it might be a little more difficult to do that with any specificity that is not stereotypical and potentially offensive. So I guess my thought would be, and again, my friend, audience member, how would you handle it? Because it may be that I'm just missing something, and that's very, very possible. I could just be missing a very easy, right in my face type of suggestion. But I would just say, just write, make her actions authentic to who you've set her character up to be. Give her character the necessary depth. So you're thinking about things like her, obviously, strengths and weaknesses, wounds, how she handles situations that are uncomfortable to her and why she handles them that way. What is her character arc going to be? What is she overcoming in herself? What are things in her character that make her personal goal harder to achieve, And focusing on those things rather than trying to find some costume to put on her so that she seems like a Black person. Because, as we know, Black people and any ethnicity of people in any culture are not a monolith. Everybody has, despite what media and all of that entertainment and all of that kind of stuff will try to present about each ethnicity, they're not a monolith. Everybody is living their lives the way they're living them. Some people's lives do fall into those stereotypical things, and other people's lives do not. Okay. So just let her be authentic to what you're setting up, and don't worry about trying to add tells that will let us know that she's Black. Just let her be. Just let her be. And in your mind, this is a Black character, and that's fine. And if you find things as you're writing that kind of help with that, but I would say focus more so on her character, the depth of her character, the characters of her parents, the way they all interact with each other, why they interact in that way. Are there, if you're doing like this interspecies relationship, then what sort of problems has that caused specifically in the family and specifically in the society, right? And then this is kind of stereotypical also, or cliche might be a better word, but it's like when the mom and the dad birds got married, maybe the mom's flock and maybe even the dad's flock kind of disowned them. You know, they went off and mated with birds that were not in their flock, right? And had a chick that's not really accepted anymore. But I don't know that that's kind of like the story that you want to tell of not being accepted. You know, is that even a thing that you want to tell because of your interspecies biology? I don't know. Is that a story you want to tell? You have to decide what story you want to tell and do what's best for the story. I think it's admirable that you want to add representation. I'm not sure if it's possible to do it in this case, being that they are birds, especially if this is a written story, only written, unless you don't mind falling into stereotypes and cliches, in which case have at it. There are a plethora for you to choose from if you're not worried about having a more nuanced sort of representation of what a Black character might be, right? So I think I'm going to stop right there. I don't know that I'm satisfied with the answer that I've given, and perhaps I could have chosen a different question, but I found that this question was interesting when I saw it, and I kind of wanted to chat about it. You know, perhaps we don't always have to come up with a conclusive answer for every question that we find, right? So I won't say that I'm like 100% satisfied with the answer that I've given, because I do like to provide like the problem solving answer, like do this. This is how you can do that. And sometimes that's not the answer. It's going to boil down to what story do you want to tell? And does trying to force potentially Black coding onto your bird main character help or detract from the story? Or does it become pandering and fake and obnoxious? Okay? That's the question you have to ask. Is it worth it? Does it matter? And I'm not saying don't represent Black people or any ethnicity in your story. I think it's great. Everybody has a place. I love stories that have everybody in there just doing their thing, right? But in this case, it may not work, and that's fine. It may not be an issue that you have to present because these are birds. That might not even be an aspect of it that's necessary because these are birds, right? You know. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Let me know how you would answer this. Have I offended you? Please forgive me. That was not my intention. You know, we're after work, and so some of the, filters might not be operating at full blast. You know what I'm saying? If I offended you, I apologize. That was not my intent. If you have an answer or a better answer, or would you just suggest don't even worry about it, girl? Just write the story and make a good character that we can love, and let the audience put whatever characteristics they want on her to live vicariously through her story, right? So I'm gonna stop there. Listen, have a wonderful weekend. I hope that you've had a wonderful day so far, whatever time you're watching this. And listen, get some sun or at least some fresh air, you know, eat something nourishing, you know, lift some weights, throw some heavy stuff around, and I will see you next time, friend. Bye.